Hello, happy Easter, coronavirus sexes. It's your ticker guy. You know, that the insanity of what we are doing is eventually going to come out. The screaming about it all being Trump's fault, of course, is still going on. And then we have things like the article the other day in the Wall Street Journal about a 99-year-old grandfather who passed away with none of his loved ones near him. Easter is supposed to be a time, for Christians anyway, for us to celebrate the anniversary of the resurrection of Christ. The imagery is powerful. The tomb with sunlight streaming in, the rock rolled away with no explicable reason. There's nothing there except a shroud. And, of course, the fear in the apostles and others that the grave had been robbed, basically, or somebody had taken the body. Of course, then, the story continues. The people supposedly saw him up until Pentecost when he shows up. But, let's think about this, folks, in the today context, not in the mystical context, because today you can't go to church because some scold told you can't. You actually listened to a government official that told you that the First Amendment doesn't apply because there's a pandemic going around. Well, the last time I checked, there was this thing that started with Congress shall make no law. And then people say, well, that's the federal government. Well, that's true, it is. However, the 14th Amendment has this thing in it called incorporation. It is the reason that states can't pass laws that say black people can't vote, for example, or black people can't go into this theater. Incorporation says that the rights guaranteed in the Constitution are incorporated against the states. But we only use that when it's convenient. We only use it when it meets some narrative that we happen to like for some particular pressure group. When it happens to be just the right of people to move about and do what they wish, who are not infected, there's no evidence that any of these people that were going to go into that church actually has COVID. No, that's perfectly okay. Well, we've had one federal judge say that, no, it's not. And the service that a church in Kentucky was going to hold, and which drew threats that they were going to start tracing and quarantining anybody who showed up, even if they held the service as a drive-in theater with people in their cars. Federal court, I don't think it was appeals court, district court, came out and said, oh, no, you're not. You're enjoined from this, which means that if the police try to show up and do that sort of thing, take down license plate numbers and then start quarantining people, you actually, at this particular point with that ruling, that person's not a law enforcement officer anymore. They're an armed thug. And you are perfectly within your rights, according to this judge, to deal with that accordingly. Why? Because that particular ruling has been struck as unconstitutional. Therefore, it is not a law. It is not an order. It is a poof. The person is no more than a mafia enforcer. That he happens to have a magical blue suit on doesn't change anything. But I want to talk about the virus itself and the ignobility we serve up on people. There's a piece in the Wall Street Journal from the 10th about a 99-year-old grandfather who passed away, couldn't have the care, comfort, and company of his loved ones because of coronavirus. Brings back the George Carlin skit about germs, where he says, we're gonna execute you because you're an evil bastard, you're a murderer, and before we stick the needle in your arm to give you the lethal drug, we swab your arm with alcohol because by God we can't give you an infection. What sort of stupidity is that? Well, the same stupidity that says that a 99-year-old dying man can't have the people that he wants to visit with him come and visit. I talked about this in the context of my mother, who was deceased. She passed, a little less than 2 years ago now. It'll be 2 years in September. And she had colon cancer. And what if she had said to me, Carl, I don't give a wet crap whether or not I get coronavirus from you. I'm dying. Well, I'm supposed to be prohibited by law from going? According to the governor of Michigan, absolutely. because that's not my single one permanent residence that I've designated as the place that I'm going to live. And therefore, if I showed up in her house, I could be arrested, according to the governor. Well, bullshit, Miss Governor. Absolute, total bullshit. Well, I'm willing to take the risk that my mother might have coronavirus, and she's willing to take the risk that I might have coronavirus. And it's between the two of us. And that's the end of the discussion. Any government school that says otherwise can go to hell. Why is it that we accept this kind of bullshit, folks? 7,700 people a day in America go to they take their final walk, wherever it may be. They draw their final breath from all causes. Most of them are not from coronavirus, even in this age when people are dying from it. 7,700 people a day. Most of them do not know that it's their last day, but some do. Nonetheless, it is. And we're monsters. We are just absolute flat-out monsters because we are scared of a virus that is claiming some number of hundreds of people a day. And hey, folks, don't get me wrong. Death is bad. Okay, I'm not trying to say it is good. All right, death is a bad thing. No question at all. In fact, the death deltas yesterday were nearly 2,000. But, we got a little more than 20,000 people that have died. That's less than 3 days over the entire course of this thing. That's less than 3 days of ordinary death that happens every single day. And yet we don't screech about that. We don't screech about all the other deaths that happen in nursing homes. We don't screech about all the people that die from C. diff. We don't screech about the 100,000 a year in America who die from hospital-acquired infections. The hospital kills you. Where's the outrage? Where are the chants? Where are the marches? 100,000 each and every year. And speaking of which, we have done exactly nothing about the ridiculous overrepresentation of people in nursing homes and other skilled care facilities that are showing up in these numbers. Not just among the deaths. Now, granted, those people all have a lot of comorbidities. Most of them anyway, essentially all. But no. The infections too. Infection rates that are 10, 20 times that of the general population. Death rates that are, in some cases, 50 times their representation in the population. Nobody is paying any attention to the fact that this stuff spreads in feces. It's been documented since January. I started talking about it February. In fact, the first week of February. Think about this. The first week of February, 2 months ago. And yet, we still have. This thing goes ripping through nursing homes. What do you have in nursing homes? A bunch of people that are incontinent. What do you have in hospitals? Well, you have them treating this as the only way that this can be spread is from respiratory droplets because, by God, the CDC says so. Does anybody remember what the CDC had to say about this disease when it first started? That it was very unlikely to be transmissible person to person at all? Oh, then they changed their mind. Does anybody remember what happened with AIDS? We can't close the bathhouses because if we point out correctly that the primary way that this thing is being spread is through those places out in San Francisco, and that is the huge vector into the population, we will piss off protected classes, specifically gay men who will vote the mayor out of office. And what was the reward for shoving 450,000 Americans into the hole with AIDS? That would be that particular individual now having a Senate seat. Go look it up. Are we going to do anything about that as Americans? Of course not. We're not going to do anything about it because we didn't do anything about it then, and we're not going to do anything about it now. Why the high priests are not just gay men as they were back then in the early 1980s because they could vote you out of office. Oh, no, they're healthcare workers, including those heroes in the nursing homes and in the hospitals. Well, I don't doubt that people who are caregivers they're doing a job that needs to be done, and especially when there's a lot of people that are sick, that's kind of a big deal, right? But who's telling them that that nice high-pressure commercial toilet in the bathroom sprays whatever happens to be in it all over the room whenever you yank the handle? Nobody. Nobody's saying, oh, well, that's a huge infection vector. No, really? And by the way, don't tell me that the simple answer is to put a lid on the thing either. Think about that for about 10 seconds. What happens if you lift up the lid? Oops, now it's on your hands, right? Then you sit down on the pot. What are the odds that your back does not touch the lid? Well, if it does, either your bare back or your clothing is now contaminated with whatever was in the bowl the last time it was flushed. Ironically, the standard toilet that goes in residences is much less likely to cause this kind of thing because it doesn't tend to spray things all over the place. It doesn't run on high pressure. But no. We can't do anything about that, because that would mean that we'd actually have to face the facts about how this thing is being spread in all probability. We still continue to deny that it's there, even though an MIT biobot has found coronavirus in feces in sewage. Let me guess, it got there from respiratory droplets. Really? Are you that dumb? You take a sample out of the sewer and you think it got in there from respiratory droplets? I think it... Come on, folks. We all know where it came from. What is the first standard for infectious disease when you first run into it? The presumption is that every single one of the orifices that you have is a potential place to spread it. And until proved otherwise, that's how you treat it. It comes out of your pie hole, it comes out of your pee hole, it comes out of your butt hole. It's infectious. And until you can prove it's not, that's the standard. But no. We can't do that, because if we do that, then we have to deal with the reality of this. The second thing is that we are all told that the answer to this is a vaccine, but there's never been a successful, durable coronavirus vaccine. It has never happened in the history of the planet. And you know what? We heard the same thing about AIDS, didn't we? How many of you are too young to know? How many of you don't remember the chyrons on the television and the headlines in the newspapers? Little sidebar after a while. The body count. Every single day. Eventually, they did close the bathhouses, but not before AIDS had been seeded throughout the entire country and, in fact, the world. You know, there's 1,000 little stories within that. Some of them I read, some of them were related to me by other people, but it's all there. But we still will not go where the data tells us to go. And the data says that the curve of infection has been meaningfully suppressed in the United States. And people say, well, you know, that was suppressed because of all the social distancing and the lockdowns. That's bullshit. First off, not everywhere is locked down. Secondly, there are other places like Sweden that haven't locked down. We've converged to them. How'd that happen? Wait a minute. They didn't do it. We did it. What? How? And then people will say, well, look, they're having a spike in deaths. Well, so do we. New York, anybody? Hello? And oh, by the way, since they didn't and we did and we both ended up in the same place, would you mind explaining to me how the lockdowns did anything here? Remember, that is the test, right? Then there's another aspect of this too, which is really bothering a lot of people, which is that if there is no vaccine, then the only thing you're doing is delaying the inevitable. In other words, we're all going to get it, like it or not, which is what I said when this started, is that because of the history of vaccinations, when it comes to coronaviruses specifically, when it comes to the history of diseases like this, the reality is that just from timelines, even if we could come up with a vaccine, it wouldn't make any difference. So when are we going to stop, folks? When are we going to stop with the stupid? Okay, the fact of the matter is that you've got people like Fauci and Birx who have, over time, slowly, have admitted that this strategy doesn't, this doesn't provide permanent answers. Well, of course it doesn't provide permanent answers. And then you have the IHME and the other models, the scaring models. The ones that said that 2 million Americans were going to die, which was fanciful bullshit. The reality is that going on a ventilator for this disease in a hospital is almost a death sentence. Oh, yeah, there's a very small percentage of people who survive, but those are the only people for whom it makes a difference. For everybody else, you could hand them an oxygen bottle and an SpO2 meter and some drugs and send them home. It might work. The drugs might work. They might not. We have Gilead that has their remdesivir trial going. They say, well, there's some significance, there's some help, but is it a panacea? Is it a 100% cure? No. The data does not say that it is. Is hydroxychloroquine a 100% cure and an absolute? No, it absolutely is not. It is especially not when you give people HCQ alone, without either doxycycline or Z-Pak and no zinc. All the clinical evidence is that you have to combine those things. But no, we have this study that is floating around pre-publication, probably never past peer review, where they just hydroxychloroquine alone doesn't appear to have done much and actually did worsen some liver markers. Okay, well, that's known. It has that side effect. It can cause liver enzymes to go up a little bit. Is that surprising? No. It does that in healthy people. Well, it does that in sick people too. That's because that's part of what it does. But we still judge for millions of RA and lupus patients that it's worth it. And speaking of which, how many of those people have shown up in a hospital and gotten a positive test? You know, that's free evidence as to whether or not this works as a prophylaxis. You risk exactly nobody's health or life by doing that. The data's already there. The government has it. Where is it? We don't know, do we? Why don't we know? This far into it with this many positives across the country, we don't know. That's intentional. Folks, there's plenty of people who want to make this thing worse than it is. But don't get me wrong. If you get this and you get hammered, it's a bad bug. Okay, but we have multiple sets of evidence at this point. We have the Diamond Princess couple. One got hammered. The other never got sick at all. Is it plausible that a respiratory virus with two people cooped up in this little space with no open air exchange, that one of them would get it and the other one would not? I don't think so. Not if that's the primary means by which it is spread. Is it plausible that you have a situation that I'm aware of, at least up until now, may not hold that way, that you got one old guy, he croaks, his wife, same house, still married, she tests positive but doesn't get sick. So how many people in these nursing homes are seroconverted? What is the probability that they've all had it? Half of them have died. The other half have had it. They've got antibodies. What is the antibody prevalence in Florida? I don't know. Nobody knows. I do know that in some places they are actually collecting this evidence, but it's not being published. Why in the hell not? California is one of those. Folks, we can't sit here with the country locked down like this. I don't care whether you want to or not. You know, I have a lot of anecdotal reports coming in from around the country with smaller and rural hospitals and other places. They've been prepared for this huge surge of COVID patients, and it hasn't materialized. What they have done is, under their alleged guidance, they have suspended all elective procedures, period. There's nobody in the damn place. This goes on for another month, or even maybe as little as another 2 weeks. Those hospitals are going to close, not temporarily, permanently. Now think about this. 1.5 million Americans a year have a heart attack or stroke. Those hospitals in those places are in many cases the only reason that you survive if you have one of those. If that happens to you and you don't happen to live in a big city. How many people are going to die over the next year? Because instead of one of those local community hospitals that's 10 minutes away, the closest place that can actually do something for them that's still open is an hour's drive, 60, 70 miles, 50 miles. You know, the number of people we're going to kill through our own stupidity over the next year or two is vastly going to outstrip COVID if we don't cut this out now. Not in another month, not in another 2 months, today, right now. Secondly, and also, we have all sorts of reports coming in that medical centers and states are being paid tremendously to classify deaths as COVID-related. And the CDC has issued guidelines that this is an appropriate thing. Oh, excuse me? If I have a heart attack and I happen to be COVID positive at that particular moment, is that a COVID death? Well, according to the CDC, it is. Well, what if I would have had the heart attack anyway? Aren't we supposed to determine causality first? Oh, no. It's perfectly... Nope. Let's rack it up. Let's make sure that the body count is as high as possible. I see. Remember, folks, 7,700 people a day die in the United States of various causes. Just because I happen to have COVID in my system at the time doesn't mean it killed me. And yet that's what we're doing today, because you got to scare the living hell out of everybody. And by God, what better way to do it than to literally let a virus go ripping through old folks' homes, because you won't isolate people's poop. I'm your ticker guy.